You know, we like to think we've got human history all figured out. But what if a huge, essential chapter, the story of a totally different, maybe even more advanced branch of our family, was almost completely erased? Well, today, we're diving into a mystery that starts with just one tiny discovery in a remote Siberian cave.
And I know, that sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But it's the absolute heart of this story. We're about to see how one small, seemingly insignificant fossil fragment is forcing us to rethink everything we thought we knew about our own past.
And this is it. This is where the whole incredible story began. Not with some grand skeleton or an ancient tomb, but with one single piece of a little finger. Found in a cave, it was holding a secret that would just completely upend the human story.
Okay, so let's get into this detective story. We're going to start at the very beginning, with that first discovery and the single lab result that turned a pretty routine dig into a global headline. So, picture this. It's 2008. Archaeologists are working in Denisova Cave in Siberia, and they find this little bone fragment. The first guess? It's probably from a Neanderthal. You know, our famous extinct cousins. Makes sense, right? But then they ran a DNA test, and this is where modern science basically becomes a time machine. See, we can now read the genetic code that's been locked inside a bone for thousands of years. And that code, well, it came back with something that just blew everyone away. It didn't match Neanderthals, and it didn't match us, Homo sapiens. It was something else entirely.
Scientists had literally stumbled upon a third branch of the human family tree. They called them the Denisovans, named right after the cave where they were found. All of a sudden, the story of humanity wasn't this simple two-way street between us and Neanderthals. No, there was a third major player out on the field, walking the earth at the exact same time as our own ancestors.
And okay, this is where the story takes its first really wild twist. The Denisovans, as a separate people, are long gone. But their legacy, their actual genetic blueprint, is very much alive. It's hiding in plain sight, inside the DNA of millions of people walking around today.
This brings us to the central puzzle of the Denisovans. I mean, the physical proof we have of them, it's almost nothing. We're talking a few tiny bits of bone and teeth. And yet, their genetic footprint is massive, spread across a huge chunk of the modern world. So how can an entire people leave so little behind in the dirt, but so much inside our very cells?
And we're not talking about tiny, insignificant traces here. In some modern populations in Papua New Guinea, for instance, people carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That's huge. We find significant traces in indigenous Australians and Tibetan populations. This isn't just some dusty, ancient history. It's living proof that our ancestors met and interbred with this mysterious group.
So, the big question is, who were these people? If they left such a strong mark on us, what were they like? Well, the few clues we have, from their bones and their DNA, are starting to paint a picture of a truly remarkable ancestor. One with traits that honestly seem almost superhuman from our perspective.
So what's the first clue? The few skull fragments that have been found suggest they had a brain case that might have been nearly 20% larger than the average modern humans. Now, hold on. Brain size doesn't automatically equal genius, but it definitely points to the potential for a whole different kind of thinking, maybe a different way of processing the world.
And some of their genetic gifts are just undeniable. For example, modern Tibetans can live and thrive at altitudes that would make most of us dangerously sick. Why? Well, it's thanks to a special gene, EPAS1, that lets their bodies use oxygen with incredible efficiency. And genetic tracking has shown they didn't just evolve this trait. Nope. It was a direct inheritance, passed down from the Denisovans, who had already mastered life in the high mountains thousands of years before us.
And that's not all they passed down. It looks like they also gave some of us a seriously powerful immune system. Just think about it. When our ancestors moved into new territories across Asia, they ran into all sorts of new diseases. But the Denisovans, they'd been living there for ages and had already built up defenses. Research is now showing that through interbreeding, they basically handed our ancestors a genetic shield that helped them survive those ancient plagues.
Okay, but if their biology wasn't mind-blowing enough, wait until you hear about the technology they left behind. Because the artifacts found in the same cave layers as their remains, they point to a level of skill that, for its time, seems flat-out impossible. This is where we go from their physical traits to the really controversial idea of an advanced Denisovan civilization.
The timeline here is just staggering.
Get this, around 70,000 years ago, someone in that cave was making polished gemstone bracelets with holes drilled so perfectly that it implies they were using some kind of high-speed, stable drill. Then, by 50,000 years ago, they were making these delicate, sharp sewing needles out of bone. To put that into perspective, we modern humans wouldn't develop comparable technologies for tens of thousands of years. It's just incredible.
I love how one of the lead Russian archaeologists put it. He said that finding that bracelet was so technologically out of place for the Stone Age, it was like finding an iPhone in an Egyptian pyramid. The discovery just doesn't fit the neat and tidy timeline of human innovation we've all been taught.
And it wasn't just a one-off thing. Those needles, they suggest they were making tailored clothing, which is a huge leap from just wrapping yourself in animal hides. They also found polished beads made from ostrich, other signs of art and decoration. When you put it all together, it points to a culture capable of abstract thought, detailed planning, and almost certainly a complex language to coordinate everything.
So this brings us to the million-dollar question, right? If the evidence suggests these people were so well adapted, so smart, maybe even so technologically sophisticated, why are they gone? Why did our species survive and spread across the globe, while this other powerful branch of humanity just vanished?
Right now, there are two main ideas on the table. The first one is pretty dark, that as our own species, Homo sapiens, spread aggressively across Eurasia in huge numbers, we simply outcompeted or even systematically wiped out the Denisovans. But a second theory suggests a totally different fate, that the Denisovans, who might have preferred to live in remote, high-altitude places, were devastated by a massive natural disaster about 12,800 years ago, a period of catastrophic climate change we call the Younger Dryas.
Whatever the reason, their story is just this powerful, humbling reminder of how much of our own past is still a total mystery. A few tiny fragments of bone and a handful of baffling artifacts are all that's left to tell the tale of an entire branch of the human family.
And that's really what I want to leave you with. The Denisovans were a ghost story, a whole lost world hiding in plain sight inside our own DNA. And it just makes you wonder, if a people this significant could be almost completely forgotten by history, how many other lost chapters of the human story are still out there, just waiting for one tiny discovery to bring them back into the light?